discussed in the Ethics Committee. And, Mr. President, with that, I would yield to the Vice Chairman of the committee, one that I consider my co-chairman, Senator Johnny Isaacs.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Mr. President, on certain occasions in the life of a public official, one is called upon to make difficult decisions and unpleasant ones, such as the case of the 6 members of the United States Senate's Ethics Committee today. But we recognize it's essential that the institution, this Senate, that passes the laws that all our citizens must live under, must also enforce those laws and rules of standard and conduct which we impose upon ourselves. It's a solemn responsibility, but it's important to the integrity and the future of this institution. The Senate Ethics Committee looks upon itself as an advisory board and a source of information and counsel to our members. We ask members to come to us when there are questions about the potential ethical violation of a decision or even something maybe passing be trivial. Our job is to make sure, in our case, that everybody that has a question gets an answer and no one unwillingly gets caught in an ethical situation. But it is also our responsibility when complaints are filed, follow up on those complaints, and if we find merit in the complaint, to enter an initial investigatory period of time, which, if that information bears enough likelihood that a violation has occurred, to ultimately go to an adjudicatory phase and then finally a decision on the floor of the Senate. It is rare, and I can tell you personally it's a situation I hope I'm never involved in again. But as I said, it's an essential process to the integrity of this body. When the particular complaint in question in the Ensign case came to us, it was, like any other case, reviewed on an initial standpoint to determine whether or not it even merited an investigation. After the initial investigation determined that it did merit that, the Senate staff did an overwhelming and wonderful job of gathering information and evidence and gathering testimony to help us get to a position to begin to make a decision whether we could go further in the case. But we didn't rely just on ourselves. We sought forensic experts in computers and technology so that the over 500,000 documents that were reviewed and cross-referenced had a forensic test to them, and we knew what we were dealing with and how it was dealt with. We went to the case of hiring a special counsel, which is a rare thing for the Senate Ethics Committee to do, but it was essential because of where the evidence and the testimony was leading the committee. And I want to say at this point in time that I have known a lot of lawyers in my day, ones I've hired and ones I've been on the other side of the deposition table from. I have never known anybody more professional or whose ability I admired more than Carol Elder Bruce, and I want to commend her on the floor of the Senate today. It was her report, which we are also submitting with the referrals today, that indicate that we have looked to see that there was reasonable evidence to conclude that a violation may have occurred. The ultimate decision on that will be up to the United States Department of Justice, and it will be up to the Federal Election Commission. But the report clearly indicates that the Senate committee did not act on what it thought or an opinion or a whim. It acted on facts determined through hundreds of interviews, 500,000 documents that were examined, and testimony that came to our committee. It is the hope of the chairman and myself and each member of the committee that every member recognizes the Senate Ethics Committee wants to be a source of information, advice, and counsel to see to it this institution always rises to the occasion as the most ethical body in our government. But we will, as a committee, if it becomes necessary and evidence finds that to be true, that we will pursue our responsibility as a committee and will do what was required of us in this body. Mr. President, I want to thank Chairman Boxer for the method in which she has handled this from the beginning to the end, and Laura Schiller, who has been her aide throughout and helpful, as I also want to commend Joan Kirchner, Chris Carr, and Glee Smith on my staff for their tireless effort. The members of the committee also should be commended for their hard work, and it has been hard work. Ben Cardin has been a tremendous legal mind for us. Sherrod Brown has been an insightful person to ferret out information and guide us in the right direction. My dear friend Senator Roberts, who is the dean of the members of the Ethics Committee. And on the floor today is Senator Roberts, Senator Cardin, and Senator Brown. Senator Risch from Idaho is not here but deserves equal credit and as the chairman said, his legal mind and his insightful nature helped us to come to the conclusions that we came to today. I want to repeat my thanks to Carol Elder Bruce for her tremendous effort and the work that she did, as well as Brian Stolars, Mike Missel, and John Longstreth, who all worked with her legal team. The staff of the Ethics Committee. Our staff director, John Sassman, has been invaluable and has worked tireless hours to see to it that every I was dotted, every T was crossed, and the committee did its job. And to Rochelle Ford, Lynn Tran, Bill Corcoran, and Dan Schwager, thanks to them for all the effort that they made. I will end where I began. No one in public office volunteers for the type of responsibilities that we have had in the case of Senator Ensign. But all of us took that responsibility when it came upon us, recognizing the integrity of the Senate and the integrity of our decision was important on the future of this body. As sad as the deliberations were and the ultimate result was, it was proof that this Senate and its Ethics Committee can stand and do the effort necessary to see to it this institution's integrity proceeds in the future uninhibited and unendangered. Mr. Chairman, Mr. President, with that remark, unless there is a member who would like to speak, I will note the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
from Nebraska?
North Dakota.
I thought it was North Dakota.
Yeah. I ask that a quorum call be dispensed with.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam President. I rise to speak this afternoon about the escalating cost of gasoline at the pump, something that affects every American consumer. Crude oil prices are now more than $100 a barrel, and the price of gasoline at the pump for our consumers is about $4 on average across the nation. It's even more here in the district. And despite some correction, recently in the oil commodity markets, the U.S. Energy Information Administration expects that prices this summer will average $1 more than they did just a year ago. Now, gasoline price spikes like this are a form of stealth inflation eating away at the income of American families, impacting our economic growth and deepening the hardship to the almost 14 million people that we have who are still looking for work. Some economic analysts indicate that for each $10 increase in the price of a barrel of oil, it has an impact of reducing our economic growth by about 0.2%. And each 0.2% equates to 120,000 fewer jobs that are created just in the first year of that type of increase. So you can see that it has a very significant cumulative impact. Imported oil also greatly affects detrimentally our balance of trade, and last year alone contributed $265 billion to trade imbalance for our nation. The high price of oil, whether it's at the wellhead or the price of gasoline at the pump, impacts every sector of our economy. It affects jobs, it affects economic growth, and it certainly affects the purchasing power of the American family and therefore their standard of living and our quality of life. So what do we do? Well, the fact is oil prices are subject to the same laws of supply and demand as other commodities. When we increase the supply, that helps bring prices down. When we reduce demand, that helps bring prices down. And of course, just the reverse is true as well. When we have less supply or more demand, that tends to push the price higher. And so clearly, we need to do all we can to produce more energy in this country, and certainly we need to produce more domestic fuel, more domestic oil and gas. Now, I don't know how many people realize it, but over the last few years, over the last approximately 5 years, oil imports into this country have actually been going down. And that's why I've brought this chart along, which was prepared by the Congressional Research Service. As you can see from the chart, from about 1985 to 2005, we increased our imports to a total by 2005 of 12.4 million barrels a day, 12.4 million barrels a day of imported oil, approximately 60% of the total oil that we consumed in 2005. However, since 2005, things have begun to change. We've made progress. We've made progress both because we are producing more oil, gas in this country, and also because we're using less. And so you see here from 2005 to 2010, we have actually reduced the amount of oil that we import into this country from about 60% of what we use to less than 50%. And today about 49% of the fuel that we consume is actually produced in this country. That is a significant reduction, a reduction in our imports of about 3 million barrels a day from 2005. Well, so what changed? Well, what changed is that we're producing more oil. We're producing more oil offshore. We're producing more oil onshore in the lower 48. And we're also producing more natural gas liquids. And as I said just a minute ago, also we're consuming less. We need to continue to do both. In addition to those things, though, we are also increasingly relying on friendly governments for our imports rather than governments that are hostile to our country. For example, last year, we were importing twice as much oil from Canada as we were from Saudi Arabia. And that's certainly a good development, and we need to continue to not only produce more domestic oil, but to the extent we import oil, bring it in from countries that are friends rather than countries that are foes or certainly who may not share our beliefs and our interests. We have opportunity to do that. For example, right now, very close to my state, we are working on a project which is the Keystone XL pipeline. The Keystone pipeline is designed to carry crude oil from the Canadian oil sands in Alberta, Canada, to refineries in the Gulf of Mexico. The problem is we're still awaiting approval for that pipeline. U.S. approval of this project will cost our nation not one penny, but will increase the supply of oil and gasoline in our country and help hold down the price of gasoline at the pump. At the same time, it will help reduce our dependence on oil from volatile parts of the world, create thousands of good jobs in America, and we all know how important that is at a time when our nation still has 9% unemployment and millions of people out of work. But we have similar opportunity to boost the supply of domestic oil and gas right here on American soil as well, not just in the lower 48, but also in Alaska. The Trans-Alaska Pipeline could help increase supply enormously, but right now it is only carrying about 1/4 of its capacity. The pipeline has the capacity to carry 2 million barrels of oil a day. Right now it's carrying something over 600,000 barrels of oil a day. So clearly, tremendous capacity that's not being utilized. Senator Murkowski has eloquently pointed out that the state of Alaska holds an estimated 40 billion barrels of oil. 40 billion barrels of oil, the equivalent of more than 60 years' worth of imports from the Persian Gulf, yet that oil is excluded from our nation's reserve figures. The United States is already the third largest oil and gas producing nation on earth with 28.4 billion barrels of proven reserves, but it also has an estimated 162, almost 163 billion barrels of technically recoverable oil, according to the Congressional Research Service. Only Russia and Saudi Arabia produce more than our country. So the lesson in all of this is clear. We can and we must increase domestic production of oil and gas in our country. And the record over the past 5 years clearly indicates that we can do it. As a matter of fact, we're on our way to do it, and we can do much, much more. For example, in my home state of North Dakota, we've been working over the last decade to increase oil production. And we have. Since 2005, North Dakota's increased its production of oil by more than 200,000 barrels a day. North Dakota is now the fourth largest oil-producing state in the nation. We've passed up states like Oklahoma and, more recently, Louisiana. And we have opportunity to produce much, much more. We've just barely scratched the surface. Last month, I hosted a meeting of the U.S. Geological Survey in Bismarck to make the case for a new updated study of recoverable reserves in the Williston Basin. Of course, the Williston Basin covers parts of North Dakota, Montana, and extends into Canada as well. The last agency study was completed in 2008, and it indicated that there are 3.5 to 4 billion barrels of recoverable oil in the Bakken Shale Formation, which is in the Williston Basin. 3.5 to 4 billion barrels of oil recoverable. Now, industry scientists and engineers, however, who are working out in the Williston Basin right now feel that that figure is low and that the reality in terms of recoverable oil reserves in the Williston Basin is much, much higher. And that's why we're asking the U.S. Geological Survey to come out and do a reassessment. If they're right, the results will attract tens of millions of dollars in new investment to the region, creating more domestic fuel at lower prices for American consumers, more jobs in this country, more jobs in our state, in Montana, more jobs for our country. Also, it will help us develop infrastructure and sustain economic growth throughout the region. Now, in North Dakota, we've focused on creating more energy, more oil and gas, more other types of energy as well, by creating a legal tax and regulatory climate, a business climate that encourages that private investment and job creation. I've spoken several times here on the floor, and more times than I can count at home and around the country, about the need to forge a legal tax and regulatory climate in America that will attract investment in the energy industry, whether it's wind, biofuels, coal, or oil and gas. At a time when America is struggling with a 9% unemployment rate, the need to create private sector jobs is absolutely paramount. It is job number one. And building our domestic energy industry is one of the keys to accomplishing it. The oil and gas industry alone supports 7.5% of the United States gross domestic product and more than 9 million American jobs. Now, government doesn't create those jobs, but government creates the environment that empowers and unleashes the creativity and energy of American enterprise. The challenge confronting the United States energy industry today, however, is a climate of legal tax and regulatory uncertainty. This uncertainty is not only sidelining investment and impeding production, but also hindering job creation and raising fuel prices at the pump for American consumers. We all want to ensure that we have clean air and water. But at the same time, we all want to develop our nation's abundant natural resources, doing it with good, sound environmental stewardship. But clearly we need to look at our current legal, tax, and regulatory environment to make sure that we have the common sense, reliable rules that will not only enable but actually empower companies to invest the hundreds of millions and billions of dollars in new technologies that will help us unlock our energy resources in this country and do it with the kind of environmental stewardship that we all want. And it's vital for the rest of our economy. The reason for that is simple. If the energy industry can't grow, neither can our other industries. They can't create the jobs and opportunities that our nation so very much needs, and they can't provide the affordable energy that American families and businesses depend on every day. Impeding domestic energy production, moreover, is a national security issue as well as an economic issue. Increased dependence for oil on unstable parts of the world like the Middle East and Venezuela puts not just our economy but our nation and our nation's security at risk. Yet rather than reduce constraints on production, rather than encourage more exploration and recovery, rather than make our country a better place to do business, our laws and regulations too often seem aimed at serving every other purpose but increasing domestic energy production and supply. Ironically, at a time when we need to invest and create jobs, billions of dollars are not being deployed. That's because energy investors are waiting to see what kind of rules will govern things like fracking for domestic oil, hydraulic fracturing, CO2 management, and transmission line siting. Companies out there are ready to make billion-dollar investments that will have a lifespan of more than 40 years, but they don't know the rules of the road. And by certainty, I don't mean more restrictive rules and regulations. I mean common-sense rules of the road that won't change arbitrarily or according to political crosswinds. A number of us in the Senate, on both sides of the aisle, are already working on common-sense initiatives to ensure that Congress, rather than government agencies, establish those rules. I've already spoken about some of those here on the floor. Today I'd like to talk about another one. Today I want to discuss, for just a short period, another piece of legislation that I believe will help reduce the price of fuel at the pump, not by increasing production, but simply by applying good judgment to the rules that govern distribution of gasoline in the United States. Senator Roy Blunt, myself, and a number of other U.S. senators are promoting a bill called the Boutique Fuel Reduction Act of 2011. This legislation would simplify the nation's fuel standards and make more fuel available to American consumers. It would give the administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, the flexibility to waive certain agency requirements pertaining to the use of specific or boutique fuels, specialty fuels, when extreme or unusual distribution problems are limiting supply. Currently, the increased use of different types of fuel for different parts of the country is causing artificial shortages in some retail markets and consequently higher prices at the pump for our motorists. A service station in one city that runs out of fuel may not be able to use a certain blend of gasoline available just 50 miles away because it's not approved by the EPA for use in that location. Unfortunately, under current law, the EPA can waive the requirements only during a natural disaster, not to meet shortages or price spikes like we have today. The law that we're sponsoring would change that. In addition to the bill, myself and a group of U.S. Senators and House members as well have also sent letters to the EPA, to EPA Administrator Lisa Jackson, calling on the agency and the Department of Energy to complete the implementation study which Congress requested. That report was due in 2008. This study would examine, or this report would examine the effects of the nation's varying boutique fuels on retail prices and also assess the feasibility of developing national or regional standards to reduce the multiple varieties required today by the EPA. Having fewer types of fuel would make more fuel available during shortages, thereby putting downward pressure on prices at the pump. It would give refineries more options to meet demand and help stabilize and reduce the retail price of gasoline. And we expect that EPA and the Department of Energy to follow through on the congressional intent that was outlined in the 2005 law and conduct and complete that study as soon as possible, which correlates closely with the legislation that we're sponsoring. Bear in mind, the measures I've just discussed don't cost anything. They take no funding to work. Yet they can help us reduce fuel prices for the American consumer, for our American families. They can make doing business in America more affordable, reduce our trade deficit, and help get Americans back to work again. We need to increase domestic fuel production, and we need to provide regulatory relief in order to do it. Because high energy prices, whether it's fuel for our cars or electricity for our homes and businesses, impact virtually every sector of American life. That includes jobs, that includes economic growth, that includes the purchasing power of the American family, ultimately includes our standard of living and our quality of life. Our future is fueled by energy, and that future depends on the decisions and the choices that we make right now, and we need to get them right. Madam President, I appreciate greatly your time on the floor this afternoon. It's wonderful to see you, and at this point I yield the floor. I also note the absence of a quorum.